Good morning, all. It has been a very, very, very cold period of time that we've had. We've had a lot of big sporting news in the last days. Big news coming out of Juventus and another corruption scandal in Italian football. Juventus have been docked 15 points. This is to do with their transfer policy in recent seasons and some creative accounting. Trossard signed with Arsenal. That's a minor transfer, really. It's not a massive transfer. It strengthens their squad, undoubtedly. It makes them it adds a bit more depth to their team, and I believe he's not FA Cup tied, so he can play in the fourth round next weekend, which will be important for Arsenal. That adds added depth to their defensive side of things. The Juventus situation is very, very interesting. They've docked 15 points, not the first time Juventus been docked points. Remember when they were in Serie B? Yes, this scandal does involve other clubs in Italy. It's to do with basically Juventus's transfer policy on loans and transfers and creative accounting. They're also under investigation by um, the uh, the trade commission in Italy, basically because they have been listed on the Italian Stock Exchange in Milan. So the Italian Competition Authority are also investigating them over the creative accounting. Uh, Various members of the board and backroom staff have been suspended. So Juventus are in crisis, and I can see a major exodus of players who want to play Champions League football. There are some questionable transfers as well. I think the Pogba situation is quite interesting. What's my thoughts on the Dani Alves situation? Until charges are formally brought, very similar to Mendy and Mason Greenwood in a sense, except it's in a different legal jurisdiction. So in that regard, it's difficult to comment on a legal system that I'm not overly familiar with. And the fact that it's yet another high profile player, it raises questions about the culture within not just football but a variety of sports. We've seen this issue raise its ugly head time and time again. Multiple high profile players and athletes in sport have been accused of this sort of offence. The Mendy situation is still ongoing. There's still two charges that need a retrial. Mason Greenwood's got a um, it's a complex situation. There's not much news coming out. It involves an incident in a nightclub. Uh, again, because not a lot has been released by the state prosecutor. It is what it is. Cassano, yes, Cassano is a fiery character, controversial player in his time. Had his own on and off field issues. Again, question marks over directors of football. Chief executives, agents, the lack of transparency in the transfer market and in football finance. It's something that keeps rearing its ugly head. But I haven't even got to what's happening in the NRL. I mean, the players may be going on strike for round one. There's issues surrounding the NRL CBA negotiations. Yes, the salary cap has been increased, but the salary cap was meant to be set um, in November. They only set it literally at the beginning of the month. So there's concerns around the finance and player salaries and in the NRL in Australia. This is an expansion year with Dolphins joining as the 17th team. But there has been a 25% increase in the salary cap. I do believe there's a lot of issues going on where the Players Association and Christian Welsh is the head of the Players Association now. He's been elected by the players as one of the most senior players in the NRL to be their head, their player head. Um, so we'll see what happens. In regards to the US men's national side, a lot of head coaches lost their jobs following the World Cup or during the World Cup. I think it's again another one of those. Um, situations where the rumour mill's going, and he might be agitating for a better deal for the deal he has at Roma. He's won a European trophy with them. He's won every European trophy that's currently going. So, and he turned down a national job before. The struggles of Chelsea and Liverpool have been quite noted this season as well. And so we'll see what happens with both Graham Potter and Jurgen Klopp. Manchester United are up for sale, apparently. The guy who owns Ineos, who also owns Nice, and the Grenadier 4x4 cycling team, the Grenadier Ineos Tour de France team, um, is interested in putting in a bid for Manchester United. Whether that actually changes the culture and situation at the club is another thing. Obviously, regardless of where United finish in the league, whatever trophies they win, the fan base has never been really on board with the Glazer family owning the club. Going way back when Ferguson was manager, there's been a marked decline in the success of the club. Even when Ferguson was there, they were less successful as time went on. Yes, they won trophies, but they were being challenged more regularly by the clubs. Portugal currently has the best squad they've had since 2006. We'll have to sell Nice. Will he have to sell Nice because of conflict of interests? That's an interesting one. We got, well, obviously Man City own, the owners of Man City own multiple football clubs. Um, Again, football ownership and governance that comes into question. Imagine if Nice and Manchester United meet in the Champions League, for example. He owns both. That would be a conflict of interest, in my opinion. Um, so uh, whether he becomes a majority shareholder or minority shareholder will be interesting. Before the Glazers bought the club, they were listed on the stock exchange as a public limited company. Yes, you can ask questions here. Anyone can ask questions. There's no silly question, really. Yes, the growth of the game and the growth of the sport in the US has definitely been noted over a long period of time. It's now overtaken ice hockey as a participation sport, although the MLS is still far smaller uh, uh, than the NHL by a significant. How many chicken nuggets will I have to consume for me to completely blow out the bathroom? Well, I can do a 24 McDonald's nugget box and be fine. So that might take some doing. I haven't actually worked out what the limit of chicken I can have yet, and I'm pretty got a pretty solid stomach when it comes to spicy food. So we could be here for quite some time. Yeah, the Juventus board members who stepped down, a lot of them have still been hit with breach notices. Only countries I see being always better is England, France, Spain, and Germany. I think Italy won't be ever better 10 years, 10 years. Um, yeah, so the board members who stepped down, several have been implicated. Pavel Nedved, who was director of football, club legend, has received a ban as well from football operations. Agnelli has got a ban, the owner, who also obviously owns Fiat. Um, the whole situation with Juventus, they're still, and days ago, Agnelli was saying, well, we're still interested in the Super League. We're still going for the Super League. There's a reason for that. They face expulsion. I mean, if the Qualities Commission, which is something to do with the business side of things, it, but yeah, the club finances and club books in Italy. I mean, the fact this involves other clubs as well. It's not just Juventus. Juventus are the ones who I think are the centre of the problem, and the other clubs that have been linked with dodgy transfers, where they've sold Juventus players or bought Juventus players, um, is an interesting one. And that'll be an interesting side of things. I think other clubs like Empoli are involved. Sampdoria are implicated as well. I think there could be far. This could be the tip of the iceberg. I think Serie A is very, very reluctant to punish them all because that will completely destroy their league. Basically, a league structure and a footballing nation that's still recovering from the 2005-2006 match fixing scandal and bribery scandal. Ronaldo playing for Al Nassr in his debut. Look, that was a pointless testimonial friendly thing. In regards to that, I think with all the way he left Man United, the issues there, the issues at Juventus towards the end, the issues with Portugal at the World Cup. Um, when we have the debate of who's the greatest, I still say Pele, but that's my personal opinion. The Piers Morgan interview is it just sums up how out of touch with reality I think Ronaldo actually is, and what we now know about how high profile clubs look after their players. These guys don't live in reality; they live in a bubble. Um, they live in a bubble, uh, quite honestly. In regards to the USA and their performances, obviously they missed in 2018, but a lot of nations is more. Joseph Pico is the best player scored most goals in history. Yeah, I mean, look, in regards to be fair to Ronaldo, if I was getting paid 200 million, I'd do anything. Um, money doesn't necessarily make you happy, and just because he's getting paid that, imagine what he's got to pay. You know, he's got to obviously, yes, he's going to get paid that, and then you have to look at his various business interests and the taxes he's got to pay, and where obviously he'll be based for tax purposes, because obviously I think the Portuguese government would like a fair share of the tax that he probably back owes. Um, and then residency becomes interesting. But the Saudis have untapped limited wealth. They can afford to pay him the value of a football club, basically. 200 million a year, that's only 100 million less than what they bought Newcastle for. So that's thinking. Ronaldo said he didn't care for the money and all he wanted to do is play Champions League football. Yeah, it's fine. But that's the Piers Morgan interview. I think that was a deliberate attempt, that was a deliberate manoeuvre by Ronaldo to get out of a contract he didn't want to be in anymore, or out of a situation he didn't want to be in anymore. Um, but the situation at Man United with the structures there, regardless who the manager is, and Ten Hag is having a good start to his first season. Um, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, Saudi Arabia. I mean, less about politics, the better. Yes, you can have a team full of talent that can't play well together, or you can have a team of players who are sum of all their parts who actually play better together. So a team of individuals or a team of players. You can have a superstar-studded team and they can't win anything, or you have a team of hard-working individuals who are part of a system and a unit that actually performs better than the stacked team. Um, and so there you go. Ah, Mr. Buffett. Ah, Mr. Rob. How's it going, Rob? Plague Doctor. Yes, all my hair's gone. It's cold. I've had a miserable week, a couple of weeks at work. I've got 3 days off next week. I've got all my last of my annual leave to take, which will be a 5-day weekend, which will be fantastic. Um, but no, the Ronaldo situation, much like any, you know, people criticise Messi for going to PSG. I know it's a nothing league. The French league has declined. I think that is an honest assessment. Historically, it's a very competitive league. If I feel the USA will have much more young talents coming up. Look, yes, they are going to be co-hosting a World Cup. Yes, the sport has grown massively, so the player base is bigger than what it was. Um, and you know, so in regards to the growth of the sport and the fact they're now hosting their second World Cup in my lifetime, yes, the sport's come a very long way since uh, 1990. Very, very long way in the US. And they had obviously attempts in the late 70s and 80s with a professional league where Pele and George Best played, and it didn't work out. But it laid the groundwork for the interest to be there. It just needed the financial stability of teams and the financial backing and sponsors. So it got there via the World Cup in '94, which the prerequisite of that was to reform a professional game in the US, which they did. It went through struggles in its early formation in the MLS, and then David Beckham comes along and plays for LA Galaxy, and the rest, as we know, is history. But no, in regards to the growth of the sport in the US, to be massive, but a lot of that is driven off the back of European football. A lot of the growth we see of the fandom of the sport in the US is off the back of growth in European viewership. The MLS, while it is a growing league and it has definitely grown with its income revenue streams and the value of teams and the attendances are good. The sales of the sales of replica jerseys and merchandise and people buying season tickets and average attendances are definitely up. So in that regard, yes, it's grown really well. But the reason why the majority of kids are now playing the game and adults are watching the game is because of their viewership figures of European football, the Champions League, the top European leagues, and the TV deal that ESPN and NBC and these other networks have for the Premier League, Serie A, La Liga, the Bundesliga, the Champions League, Europa League, and the international competitions. So it's not solely driven off the MLS. The MLS is a secondary metric when it comes to the growth of the sport over there. I know I should be classed as a golden generation, but the media did, and the players were playing amazing for them. That was the club country debate. We always have that. If you didn't know, Fulham are massive, not just in West Ham, but they have a massive backing in the US, mainly for our owners and players. We've had Reed, Robinson, Dempsey. Yeah, I will agree. Um, the American-owned clubs seem to have really big followings in the US, partly because in the markets where their owners are from, the locations their owners are from, they do really big advertising campaigns, the pre-season tours and all that. Um, and especially when like the Wrexham situation with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, um, Wrexham is not even in the football league, um, but because of that celebrity link, Wrexham jerseys showing up all over the world because it's seen as fashionable to buy their merchandise. It's the same with the random South Sydney fan. When I say the random South Sydney Rabbitohs fan, it is because of Russell Crowe owning the South Sydney Rabbitohs in the NRL. So major sporting events and major public events, even protests, there for some reason over the last decade or so, that South Sydney jersey or jerseys will show up anywhere. There will always be a South Sydney fan at a sporting event. I think at last year's Super Bowl there was a couple of South Sydney fans having a couple of schooners, which is the Aussie version of beer, basically having a lager in the Super Bowl. So yeah, I would look. This is where I think where you have that false economy. It's like the New York Yankees. How many people do you see wearing NY hats, Yankees, and even Mets hats as well? It's a fashion statement. And the old LA Kings, Chevy logo, the '80s Gretzky logo. My brother's got one of those hats. He hates ice hockey. Well, he's watched a few games with me, but he's not an ice hockey fan. He's got LA Kings gear from the '80s, early '90s off the retro store through the NHL website. They were doing, CCM and all that. Obviously, have the retro rights, or we did. And he wears an LA Kings baseball cap. He's not an ice hockey fan. So certain fans, certain high-profile fans, for example, or certain high-profile players going to a team, build that celebrity kind of fan base, that cultural impact, which then transcends the sport and then leads to great merchandise sales. Um, yeah, the LA Kings are just fashionable because Ice Cube and NWA and some other West Coast musicians are celebrity fans and actors as well. Not because they're celebrities; they actually are from LA. They're from Southern California. It's a major sports team down there, and they're fans of it. So Will Ferrell, he's an LA Kings fan. He also owns an LAFC, so he's actually a sports fan in general. I have what did I have? I've got 49ers and the Dolphins, Miami Dolphins. There's Boston Bruins. I see a lot of Boston Bruins merchandise. I see a lot of people wearing beanies and t-shirts. Patriots, Las Vegas Raiders. Well, it's the Raiders. It doesn't matter if they're LA, Oakland, Vegas. That team's moved around a lot in its existence. I think it's moved like 4 times. It just becomes fashionable to wear Raiders gear, whether you follow the NFL or not, because it's been seen in film and in TV, and a famous actor or a famous musician or a famous athlete is seen wearing that, you know, jersey or hat or hoodie or whatever. Um, the cultural. Oh, he's doing it. It must be fashionable. Um, so there's that kind of impact that a high profile individual can have. Um, the former prime minister, oh, what was it? Not the current prime minister of Australia is a Rabbitohs fan. The previous prime minister of Australia was a Cronulla Sharks fan, and that led to a sort of a boost in their sales of their merchandise. They're a club with financial issues, or have had financial issues in the past. Yep, the Raiders gear, the LA Kings gear. You've got um, the Yankees and the Dodgers. I'm not even a baseball fan, and I've got Yankees merchandise because it is seen as fashionable to wear it. Yes. Hello. My mate's daughter's pointing at the phone saying she can see me because it's John. Yeah, it's me, Uncle John. With no hair. Last time, um, I saw my mate Rob, who's played doctor. I had hair down to my shoulders, and I have none, and it's really bloody cold. It took longer to shave my beard off, to be fair. Also, I would like to say a big thank you for all the comments left on last night's video. It took me 6 hours to upload that. I had some internet issues, so I took a power nap and then woke up at midnight and uploaded it. So I actually recorded that at like 5:30 yesterday evening, and then for some reason the internet was down for half the day, so it took me a little bit longer to upload that video. Really thankful for the responses. It's just something that I think people need to be aware of. I wish more people had watched that. Every time I've raised when we have a high profile player who's battles addiction, or a high profile player who's come out, or an athlete's come out with, saying they suffer from depression, um, they they don't do as well. So I think it is time we start having that conversation. So uh, if you please share with your friends that video. Share it on your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, because that's the one I think I can reach the biggest audience with and have a big impact with. Because yes, I've gone through all that. I've seen mates go through all that, and I know work colleagues who've gone through all that. So that's a very important um, social thing, I think. And I did link it into sport as well, and a little bit. I didn't intend to, but I did. Random South Sky's been spotted there's not just one random South Sky. There are fans of the South Sydney Rabbitohs all over the world. It's one of the most widely distributed rugby league jerseys you're going to find. You'll probably see more Souths jerseys globally than Queensland, New South Wales, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, or England. You will see Souths jerseys all over the place. I'm more likely to come over Tuesday, Rob, because that's my last day before holiday. Monday and Tuesday I don't actually finish. I've got to have a meeting at work as well, which I don't want to have. I'm having issues at work. I have a work meeting, but basically, it depends. It depends if I have to go back to the office. If I don't have to go back to the office, I'll be going back to the flat, and just walking home straight from where I finish work. Um, but you're also more than welcome to car. I heard you broke your car. I heard your gearbox went on the car you just bought that replaced the tin can that you've had. So basically, to describe my mate Rob's old car, it was his nan's car, I believe. It was the size of a shoe. It was a Ford Ka Mark One, and I could barely fit in it. And Rob's a tall bloke. He's Rob is quite a sizable tall bloke with a bit of a dad bod, and he couldn't sit up straight in the Ka. So delivering Chinese and tacos and stuff, that was fun getting in and out of the car. He then got a Vauxhall Zafira, which we live in Europe, in Opel Zafira, and the gearbox blew up. So his car history isn't great. I think he had a Mondeo, had a Skoda. He's had all sorts. Rob, you've had all sorts. Some of Rob's cars are horrifically bad. Your car history is absolutely dreadful, but it's not as bad as my motorcycle history. So there you go. Was there a possibility of Ronaldo and Messi are playing for Spain? Ronaldo's Portuguese. Messi would more likely be eligible for Italy because of his family background. Ronaldo would have never played for Spain because he was born in Madeira. 0% chance. So there's that. Oh, Ice hockey news. Rick Tocchet is the new Vancouver Canucks head coach. That's all happened very, very quickly. Bruce Boudreau is out the door. No, do not get a Citroen. They are French. They'll go wrong, and bits tend to drop off. The engine wise, French cars are really good. It's the electrics and the build quality that tends to fall apart. Fortunately, I have to rely on public transport. Same. I have to rely on public transport now. I don't mind it. We've had a lot of labour disputes, um, which have impacted fan travel, which is a link it into sport, trying to avoid the politics there. We've had a lot of strikes. We've had a lot of labour disputes. The Senators, I don't think they're fully rebuilding. I think they're getting better. I think they're making moves in the right direction. They've got the pieces there. They need to add a few little bits. They had a slow start to the season, and that's what's done them. However, they're reasonably competitive now, but they're playing catch up. And I think they're too far back, but they're not as bad as they were. And with the proposed Ryan Reynolds led takeover from the Melnick family. That will, boost. I think boost the confidence of the team, positivity. Ryan Reynolds is clearly very enthusiastic. He's a massive hockey fan anyway, and he's Canadian, which helps. And he's now had that little bit of experience now owning a sports team and learning the pitfalls along the way of a takeover. Making the mistakes. Learning. Um, on the way. He won't be the sole owner. There will be a consortium of interested parties who will have a stake. The NHL wants him as part of any ownership group. Um, yeah, so 6-2 one's not bad, but then losing 9 in a row doesn't really help. There you have your slow start. You got to you start quickly, but then you got to build on that first month. And they didn't. Yeah, Miroslav Klose and Lucas Podolski could have both played for Poland. It is true. Wilfred Zaha could have played for England. There are a couple of high-profile players who could have played for another country. Um, and Alaba could have played for the Philippines. Pepe could have played for Brazil. Deco could have played for Brazil. He ended up playing for Portugal. So yeah, there's a lot of high-profile players who could have played for another nation, be it for parentage or residency and various things. Yes, Haaland could have. Yeah, Haaland could have played for England. He was born in Leeds. Um, the Kevin Kilbane could play for England. He played for Ireland. Stephen Reid could have played for England. Played for Ireland. John Aldridge could have played for England. Played for Ireland. We could have actually done with John Aldridge in the early 90s because England really were in a transition phase, and post Lineker they didn't have that fiery centre forward um, who could wind up the opposition. We had Alan Smith as Lineker's replacement, and he didn't last in the England setup very long. Um, yeah, we're obviously spitballing names here and saying this guy could have played for that country, that guy could play for this country, and you know, I mean, the Pelini brothers, one plays for the UK at ice hockey or Great Britain, and one plays for Canada. Will Haaland change? No, he's already played on too many caps for Norway now. So therefore, under the international selection rules, He's played too many games for the nation he's decided to play for. Where unlike Diego Costa only played a handful, he played. I think he got to play less than five. Like Declan Rice could play for Ireland, that kind of thing. He's now played too many games for his nation of choice, his first choice nation, which is Norway. Can you see more Ryan Reynolds owners in the future, like Dwayne Johnson, Drake, or Gates? Look, we've already got Russell Crowe, we've got Will Ferrell, we've got Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Newman, the former actor who passed away, used to own a NASCAR team. So there's already been a load of Ryan Reynolds beforehand. Ryan Reynolds is the latest, and Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are the latest in high-profile actors and musicians who have bought into sports teams. He's not the only one. I mean, Dwayne Johnson already has a stake in the XFL. So in that regard, Ryan Reynolds is the latest in a long line of the entertainment industry so actors, musicians, and etc., who've um, obviously still do their day job, which is acting or music or TV, whatever it may be, but they also have now invested in the sports side of things. Um, the Jack Grealish situation, I don't know that Jack Grealish and Calvin Phillips going to Man City makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me. Those two transfers make no sense to me. Um, yeah, look, there's rumours that WWE will be sold to Saudi Arabia. What that then means, or to a Saudi Arabian-led consortium, what that then means for the women's division, for example, and the direction that particular promotion in pro wrestling is going to take is going to be very, very interesting. Considering there were misconduct allegations against Vince McMahon, his daughter stepping down, the holding company's got money problems. They've been losing money for a donkey's years post Chris Benoit. Um, so there are issues there. Yeah, look, they're trying to diversify their economies. They've got unlimited wealth to spend, and they've worked out that professional sport is highly profitable and is a good investment to invest in. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, unfortunately, it's not individual businessmen; it is the state, and that's where that's where this big issue is, and because the state of Saudi Arabia, the state of the UAE, the state of Qatar, and some of their human rights issues, and the various things there. Um, that is where you go, hang on a second, do we really want that kind of investment when if it was an individual businessman or in Ryan Reynolds' case, a high profile individual. He's been very successful in his chosen career, made a lot of money. Is a sports fan, so he's not just investing because it's going to make him money. He's investing knowing he may lose some money, which he has done at Wrexham, because he is actually a sports fan and he's enthusiastic about sport rather than it's just a good investment. It's going to make me some money in the long run. I can pay off dividends. Da, 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 da. I can move my money around to avoid paying taxes here, and I can pay whatever. Ryan Reynolds has bought Wrexham with Rob McElhenney because because it excites them and because they want to they are sports fanatics as individuals, as fans. That's different. Um, Oh, look, that could lead. Yeah, there could be contractual things. There's a whole host of things that could occur. There could be legal disputes. The fact that I haven't watched pro wrestling for quite some time, I've got friends who are, former wrestlers who are wrestling fans, and that's fine. I haven't watched for a long time. I've not been a fan of how the McMahons have run things. For a very, very long time. Even when I was enjoying wrestling, there was always that, what are the McMahons doing? Is this appropriate? Um, Rob McElhenney, no, he was a decent TV actor. He just wasn't very well known over here, but he was quite well known in the US and Canada. He just didn't have a massive fan base over here, and that's different. Ryan Reynolds is more film. McElhenney's more TV and streaming services, and then it depends on what streaming service you have. Um, but what they've done at Wrexham and what that's now a stepping stone. But no, Ryan Reynolds has always stated, long before he bought Wrexham, that he's a massive ice hockey fan, and at some point he would like to own if not an NHL team, maybe an AHL team. He's always stated for many many years that he would like to buy an ice hockey team, be it in North America or Europe, at any level of the professional structures. And so the Wrexham thing is linked to that, but he's always stated that he's interested in owning a sports team, especially an ice hockey team. Yeah, look, I mean, Rob McElhenney, I've seen him in a few things. He is a very talented actor, by the way. He is very, very talented. He's a good comic actor as well, but also a good serious actor. Um, but they're very, they come across as a pair of individuals who are very enthusiastic, very, very, open and affable, and I think that helps. Um, I think get the fans on board. Discussing with the community and building a positive. That they are overseas owners that have got a positive relationship with their fan base. You look at Chelsea, you look at Man United, Liverpool are starting to get a bit of fractures. Overseas owners who don't have a good relationship or a mixed relationship with the fan base. Who's going to win this one? I think Liverpool are going to possibly have a bit too much for Chelsea. Chelsea just don't score enough goals. Liverpool can score goals. They're just being very inconsistent this season. Um, what I think, so I think Liverpool probably do it. Vancouver, more desirable location to play in Canada. Have you seen property prices in Vancouver and tax prices, tax rates? They are higher than Alberta or Manitoba. While it may be a more fashionable city for the elites to live in, if you are a free agent and or on the trade block, or you're a restricted free agent, unrestricted free agent, whatever it may be, or a European player coming over, and you're on a lower end contract. You don't want to live in Vancouver for the property price. You want to live in Winnipeg or Calgary or Edmonton because it's cheaper to live. Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver are stupidly expensive in comparison to the other big cities in Canada. So if you are especially a player who's a free agent or a European player who's been drafted, if you're a European player who's been drafted, you're going to play anywhere. You want to play in the NHL. But if you're a free agent, if you read free agency, be it restricted or unrestricted, and you're offered a Canadian team comes for you, you don't want to go to Vancouver or Toronto for two reasons: higher tax, higher property prices. So it's going to cost you more money to live there. However, you're more likely to get the bigger wage packet as a free agent. So you're smaller or less expensive markets to live, for example, in Canada, you're less likely to get the bigger wage packet when you're a free agent. Um, uh, Most athletes don't live in the cities they play. That's yes and no. It honestly depends. Um, how many Premier League players or football players live near places like Newcastle? Ironically, that out in Northumberland, so just outside Newcastle, is actually quite cheap, and it's beautiful countryside, and you have a lot of land, a lot of space, and then you're not too far from Newcastle and Sunderland, so the big, Gateshead and the big urban areas. You could be in the middle of nowhere, peace and quiet, away from the press, away from fan intrusion, bit more relaxed, little village, and you can just get on with quiet. Quite a few of the Newcastle players live not too far from Newcastle. Um, yes, there. I forget who the Philadelphia Flyers player is, but they're not enforcing he wear the pride numbers on the back of his jersey. Um, and But there are some nice parts of the country. So a lot of the players who live and play in the northeast around Manchester and Liverpool and Lancashire will either live in Lancashire or in Cheshire. So they won't actually live in Manchester, or they won't actually live in Merseyside. They'll live in the more rural locations around. The Yorkshire-based players will be in the Yorkshire Dales, because that's beautiful country as well, quiet, out the way. Good place to raise a family, cheaper property prices. Because yes, you can have these big properties that have millions, but if you can pay a little bit less for it, but have like a massive mansion, you get more for your money. Um, and then there's that, and also council tax rates. People think all football players are on massive salaries. Outside of the top two divisions in English football, salaries not that great. And a lot of players live in rented accommodation. So there you go. Most UK voters go, "Oh, yeah, I know what they're on about now. The players sat on the bench in the warm." Yep. Premier League players don't need to worry about property prices. Though you think that, but when you, let's say, bought a £5 million mansion or £10 million mansion or however big their house is, it's a thing called mortgage and council tax rates, and they don't go away. If you bought it outright, then you've got your utility bills and you've got your rates, so your council tax. If You then own land on top of that. You've got to pay land rates. Um, so the taxes don't go away just because you own the property. Plenty of players have got entered bankruptcy. Plenty of professional players on big salaries have entered bankruptcy because or they've been taken to court over unpaid parking permits, something as simple as a parking permit or council tax payments. Um, and you the London-based players live in like Essex, Hertfordshire, Surrey, Bedfordshire, Kent, Sussex. They don't actually live in London. None of the London-based players live in London unless we're talking about some of the lower league clubs like Leyton Orient or AFC Wimbledon. Most of the London clubs, their players live in the home counties surrounding London. Um, so, I mean, some of the Reading players actually live round the corner from me. Um, their uh, training base, their training ground is only 2 miles from my flat. I drive past it several times a week on with work, um, and it it's a nice facility, and it's set in the middle of farmland. Yeah, but it's a very nice facility. It's their training and rehab facility. The club is the stadium is much further down the road, another 7 miles away. So they train not in Reading. They train technically in Arborfield, which is near Woking. And it's a very nice small facility. It's not the biggest training facility in the English football, but it's pleasant. And I think it's got a link to their academy as well. Essex can be expensive. It depends where you go in Essex, though. There are bits of Essex that aren't expensive at all. Um, the further northeast you go, the less expensive it gets. Partly because there's not the employment opportunities and the income that you get closer to London. Um, Essex is a strange county. Floods a lot as well. And of course, then you've only got Norwich and Ipswich in East Anglia really proper as the two professional clubs, and so Norfolk and Suffolk. There's large tracts of rural nothing basically. London's ridiculous. No, I think well, I think it's either it's in between the two. It is, but it is down the road from where I live. I could walk there. It'd take me an hour and a bit, but I could walk there and but it's a nice facility. Sindlesham, I think, is technically in. You want to be technical, it's in Sindlesham, but that's a little hamlet on the edge of Wokingham. But it's nice. Well, uh, you say that, but somehow people get by. Um, yeah, London, and this is where people think, oh, will the NFL put a team in London? London's property prices are ridiculous, and then you've got to do the currency transfer. You get paid in dollars, but you got to pay your taxes in pounds. Um, yes, there's a reason why things are cheap in the East Midlands. There is no employment because all the mines have gone, the coal mines have gone, unless you want to work in the Walkers factory. Um, but no, London is ridiculous. I will agree with that. I've got a lot of friends in London. At various levels of the wage, of the wage pyramid. The and people still believe the NFL are going to put a team in London. I can't see that happening. I wouldn't say every major. There are some cities that are cheaper to live in than people realise. Some cities are a lot cheaper than people realise, but others are really really eye-wateringly expensive. Um, in comparison. Obviously, London's national capital. Edinburgh's quite expensive as well. Cardiff is reasonably expensive, though not on the same level as some of the towns and cities around where I live. Ridiculous house prices, absolutely ridiculous. property, and that's on businesses, and that's where sports teams start making a bit of a struggle. Um, well, allegedly it could become cheaper, but I can't see that happening. Not with, as we've said, you know, um, the sports teams being owned by overseas owners, and like Chelsea, for example, that area of London's gone through the roof. Um, oh yes, Paris. Yes, Paris is very expensive, and most French cities have a lot of social problems that the French don't tell you on the tourist brochures. um, France is a country of many contradictions. Um, in Harare, you need to be a billionaire on what Zimbabwean dollars that don't exist anymore. I could buy Zimbabwe for a fiver. Um, I wouldn't mind going to places like Namibia and Botswana though, just to like see the wildlife and explore a little bit and all that. In London, is there a lot of Russian oligarchs and mafia? There's a lot of people. London's got every nationality you can think of. Literally, Russia's got London. Sorry, every nationality you can think of. I remember reading a newspaper once that did a poll on all the languages spoken, the official languages, and people's nationality. London and Paris, Birmingham, Bristol. A lot of these are cities I've been to a lot. Have a lot of social issues. Southampton, been to Portsmouth's horrible. I've been to a lot of places. Coventry City and that elephant, well, it's drawn from the old city coat of arms. Yeah, and I was asking my friend Stu at work. Um, it's drawn from the old city coat of arms, which had an elephant and castle, which is obviously similar to the city in London with the Elephant and Castle Junction, which had a similar thing with the elephant with the castle. So yes, yes, I get it now. Um, that's interesting. I'm very surprised that the city of Coventry has an elephant as its coat of arms. But Coventry City is a very, very interesting one. Does Monaco have poor people? Probably the people who go into Monaco to work who live outside in places like Nice and Côte d'Azur and stuff. Yes, but they wouldn't live there. They would just work there because it is well the most expensive city to live in Europe, I believe. Right, let's get comfy and just sort me fucking back out. Um, right. Okay. Does Luxembourg have port? Yes, because there used to be a steel and coal industry in Luxembourg, and it's still there. It's just a lot smaller. Um, uh, Interesting that we're now talking about poverty index and salaries and desirable places to live. Um, but when you're buying a sports team or when you're setting your ticket prices, certain teams can't make as much money because of the location they're in and the disposable income of their catchment area. So when we're seeing certain teams struggling financially, it could be because the fan base doesn't have the disposable income to spend as much money as fans of Chelsea or fans of Arsenal. They do quite well. You go to other parts of the country, the disposable income is less. Best country to live in Europe is Finland. They're the best social welfare system in a place. Also, yes, they are the happiest people in the world. Denmark comes second, by the way. Denmark, yeah, Finland's going to be quite good. Australia, it depends where you live. Sydney and Melbourne are ridiculous, but outside those two big cities, it's a fair bit cheaper. Um, honestly, Australia, it does depend what part of Australia you're deciding to live in. But yeah, if you're outside Sydney and outside Melbourne, you'll be okay. Um, but no, Finland is an interesting one. Um, Very interesting country, sporting wise. Very interesting as well for such a small population. How successful they've been in sport in a variety of disciplines, variety of sports. Um, and again, Finland is a very unique country in a sense. The language is very unique. Um, the, the geology of the country is unique. Get yourself up the East Mids. We've got 30p Leah's RM. Read somewhere that half of Swedish people don't work, so social society don't need. That's not correct. Um, you that means the people who are working are paying too much tax. No, that's not correct. Do not believe everything you read um, in the papers. Finland, yeah, they're very good at motorsport because they start driving at the age of 3. You can technically start driving under instruction from the age of 3. So as soon as you're able to walk, they put you in a car. And also the driving tests. You have to do a skid pan, or with the rain, the water skid pan, and a nice skid pan. Their driving test is ridiculous. I wouldn't pass it. Which is why clubs like Brighton and Bournemouth are on the rise and Scunthorpe, Oldham and Bradford are on the down. Yeah, because disposable income. Um, because economics works. So yeah, you can have your sports team. The team can be really successful, but that team makes less money than a team who are less successful but have a wealthier fan base. That's how it works. Um, but no, Finland, great F1, great rally drivers, touring car drivers as well, hill climb drivers. Finland has produced anything with 4 wheels. The Finns will throw round a track, throw on a rally stage. Um, it's like a religion over there. And of course, they're pretty good at ice hockey as well, and the other winter sports. Any winter sport the Finns are good at. Driving tests. I know in Oman you have to go forward 100 meters and backwards 100 meters with a police officer. That's it. Um, I think officially there are driving tests, but just the thing is, in places like that, highly densely populated, do you really want a car? Does public transport really work? It's not the infrastructure, but Yari Lettenham, Sami Hupia, um, and ah, there was someone else, Antti Niemi. These days, it's better to be located in Crystal Palace or Brentford rather than Bolton or Sunderland. Money talks. Yes, this is true. Um, Andretti and Cadillac. Oh, Andretti. Wilkinshaw Andretti uh, United are a combination of the old Wilkinshaw B8 supercar team and the old British touring car team, the Wilkinshaw team. Andretti do the um, IMSA and IndyCar, and and the United Autosports do NASCAR, and they've all combined together for the V8 supercars, and they want to translate not only the V8 supercar team but also an F1 team, Cadillac, because they've lost their they've gained the Ford homologation status from the Shell V Power team, so they've now got extra funding and factory support in the V8 supercars, and they want to translate that to F1 and put Cadillac on the F1 grid. Now, Cadillac in the IMSA series is a dominant manufacturer. Cadillac's done Le Mans, but they're not in the Le Mans series right now. Cadillac wants to translate their prototype IMSA side of things and their V8 supercar side of things, the Andretti, and combine it. But there is resistance. No, that was Malmo from Sweden. There was no Finnish club has ever got to a European final. But no, the Andretti Cadillac idea, there was resistance on the grid against that. But I think Liberty Media wanted to happen because they want, obviously back in the day when Bernie Ecclestone was still in charge of F1, they wanted the US F1 team to take off, and it didn't. So there is definitely more motion behind it to get a fully American team on the grid. Do I think the US have had many drivers and race winners. Um, we'll see what happens with that. Any football teams in offshore FC ground with Lovedale. Mhm. Clunk you think of Sweden's Malmö? Yeah, done that. Yeah, so the interesting thing is with F1 and a lot of motorsport right now, because of the cost of living and the cost of parts, um, budgetary caps are going to be really interesting. That's why I think what they've done with the British touring cars and what they've done with the V8 supercars in Australia, with bringing rule changes. British touring cars was last year, V8 supercars is this year in order to reduce costs. Um, I think is what's going to really have to happen with F1 and Formula E. I think they're going to really start feeling the pinch with the rise of costs, um, with the possibility of a global recession. So individual countries may not be in recession, but globally, less available disposable income from companies and individuals. Costs are going to have to be controlled, I think, a lot better, and we'll see what happens. The F1 Haas team, no, Haas obviously in IndyCar and NASCAR have got a pretty solid record. Um, and again, Liberty Media wanting to have more American involvement on the grid. Um, obviously, Ford is no longer an engine manufacturer, and there's never been a true F1 team. It'll be interesting. We've got to see the direction Liberty Media takes F1. I personally don't think it's the right direction. Um, some people think it is. More American races, or whatever you feel about that. But I haven't watched an F1 race in a while. No, Panathinaikos have never won the Champions League before. Nope. No. Benfica have won it before. Porto have won it before. Steaua Bucharest have won it before. Hamburg have won it before. Borussia Dortmund have won it before. Celtic, never Panathinaikos. No one from Greece has ever won a European trophy. Um, yeah, Nottingham Forest have won it twice, yes, but not Panathinaikos. I'd love to see Lamborghini versus Ferrari on the grid one day. Ah, well, the funny thing is, when Lamborghini was set up as a car company, because they made tractors before, and Mr. Lamborghini, Signore Lamborghini, was a Ferrari customer, and he had problems with his car. And Enzo Ferrari wasn't particularly enamoured with that, so Mr. Lamborghini goes off, makes his first two models that weren't overly successful, and then came out with the Miura, and that's the rest is history. But he did state when Lamborghini was set up, he wouldn't go into motorsport. Obviously, that isn't necessarily been the case. Um, Lamborghini were an F1 supplier in the early 90s for a couple of seasons. I think they supplied the Minardi team, if I remember correctly, for 2 years. Um, and and then there is that. Borussia Dortmund, yeah, Borussia Dortmund's got the biggest stadium and biggest fan base, yes. I think they're the second most successful club in Germany as well. Hamburg, that's what it is. And that's down to poor squad management, um, and various other issues, player development, uh, transfer policy, managerial recruitment, youth policy. A lot of things have gone wrong at Hamburg. Barca Borisov also works in tractor recruitment, yes. Hamburg flirted with relegation for years before falling. Yeah, they were decent about a decade ago, and then they just fell away. And it happens. Romanian club, yeah, that was Steaua Bucharest. I think in '86, Steaua Bucharest did that. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is with a lot of you look at the European finals of yesteryear in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the 90s, and look at it now. And this is where I hate the UEFA coefficient and how they distribute the positions for the Champions League and Europa League to the various leagues, and how basically the talents move westwards. As the old German Championship winners are counted as Bundesliga titles. Are you a fan of the 21 plus 1 rule in Germany? You mean the 50 plus 1 rule? Um, I think German clubs are better run. Um, Unfortunately, Bayern's dominated the league for the last 10, 15 years. But on the whole, German clubs better run. We don't hear of clubs going bust all the time. We don't hear of clubs going to administration all the time. Their youth policy is a lot better. Um, they Some clubs have had financial issues. Um, it is a very interesting one. I think it suits the German culture very well. It's not an official rule because not every German club is governed by that rule. It's preferred method of doing it, but it's not written in the German FA rulebook saying all clubs have to be under this ownership model. It's just an unwritten rule, really. There's a couple of clubs that buck that trend. RB Leipzig, for example, is one. Um, should should the English clubs adopt it? There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of stake, and a lot of the owners, do they want to give up um, a majority stake? Do they want to give that up? And how are fans going to be able to stump up the millions, if not billions, of pounds to buy that stake in shares? That's the problem. I think we're too far down the line, the track now. Um, um, yeah. In regards to club football and international football, yeah, Benfica won a hatful of European Cups before Portugal even qualified for a World Cup, and then Eusebio comes along, and the rest is history. After that, Steaua Bucharest, the situation there's a mess. Um, but the what I find really interesting, and I have done for some time, is basically the talents move westward. The investment has drained out of all the leagues into 4, 5, or 6 leagues in Europe now. And that's to do with the UEFA coefficient. That's to do with how the TV rights, not only domestically but also sold to the US and Asia, are dealt with. Um, and yeah, in history, only 5 clubs have won it since it. Yeah, Boavista is the one that everyone forgets about. Benfica, Porto, Sporting. Who's the other one? I'm going Braga just as a blind guess, but I could be wrong. Um, uh, One thing I want to get hold of is a Boavista jersey, just for the fact that it's hard to get hold of him. Eddie Jones back as one of his. I, it's an interesting move by Rugby Australia, um, replacing Rennie with Jones. Very similar to Jones being sacked and Borthwick coming in. I think both changes should have been made at least 12 to 18 months ago. Um, I think, with that being said, it is Eddie Jones the right guy? Is Eddie Jones the right guy? It's an interesting take, but Rugby Australia, has basically been up against it in the last 5, 6 years for a variety of reasons. The collapse of the Super Rugby original franchise system that we had to what we have now, the Western Force situation at the time to what we have now with the Israel Folau settlement, Ryland Castle, all that shambles, the lawsuits, the loss of sponsors. Um, it it's an interesting time. I don't think the Wallabies will do very well. I think Eddie Jones. I don't know. Um, he's had success as a coach, but the sport is evolving faster than he evolves as a coach. I think. I wouldn't say if the 50+1 will become comes in that we're going to have a weaker league or mass player extras because there's still some top quality players in Germany and the German national side has been more successful over a longer period of time than the English national side. So I don't think that necessarily will be the case. It's about ownership, really. I don't think the 50+1 was actually the problem because some of the German clubs have made some big transfers and made a lot of money. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. Um, yeah, the Portuguese Cup, the Taça de Portugal. Yeah, a lot of clubs have won that. Yes, English coaches used to feature quite heavily in Portuguese club football. It's probably Robson. I think Malcolm Allison was a Portuguese league title. So pretty sure Union is a dead sport in Australia. It's got problems. That is true. Rugby league and Aussie rules have definitely got better youth systems, youth policies, player recruitment, player retention, um, better base salaries for your entry level contracts for your 18, 19-year-old players when they first enter the big league and they first get their first contracts. Technically, they can sign their first contracts at 16. They're not eligible to make their debut to 18 unless there's special circumstances. Only a handful of players have played first grade rugby league, for example, before the age of 18. Yeah, Rugby Australia have just brought in not even Australian talent. They're Fijians, they're Samoans, they're Tongans, predominantly Fijians from the NRL because obviously the NRL has a salary cap and some of those players have been released from their clubs because their clubs have had cap breaches basically. So it's very hard for them now under the spotlight that Melbourne Storm and Parramatta, for example, are under with their salary cap breaches to keep hold of Radradra, for example. Um, and they've been offered these big contracts by Rugby Australia, but it completely disjoints the Wallabies because you're not getting that Aboriginal talent and you're not getting that European Australian talent that is clearly there through the system because you're blocking their pathways by paying this guy 1 million, 2 million, five, however much their contract is to play. Israel Folau was another one. Well, Israel Folau is not undoubtedly a very talented player off the field. He's a bit of a divisive character, and it led to massive, massive problems um, with Rugby Australia. He ends up going to the Catalan Dragons. He goes back to league, and now his career is all a bit washed up. He's in Japan. One of the strangest things for me is only one French team has ever won the Champions League, and then another one the UEFA Cup. No, the French league historically is very, very competitive. Marseille were done for match fixing, and it's only Monaco have got to the Champions League final since then, and it's just French football's been a mess for a while. Um, Bastia, of course, could reach the Euro final in the 70s. Yeah, lots of mafia money. Yes, lots, and same with Marseille. Lots of mafia money. Absolutely. Um, will the Dutch ever win a World Cup? I think they always seem to produce really talented players in Holland. And again, their clubs have great youth policies and great youth scouting. Um, so we'll see what happens with that. In the early days, you had St Etienne. Yes, St Etienne, Stade de Reims. Yeah, they again the mismanagement of French club football is part of the problem. Um, Yeah, rugby union, as I've said on lots of videos on rugby union in Australia and the situation it finds itself in and why things are going wrong and why things aren't working. And part of the problem is that it's paying these rugby league and AFL players like Israel Folau and Radradra, Semi Radradra, massive money to switch codes, massive money. But at the same time, they're losing talent at grassroots level who go on to the AFL or rugby league. And I'm going to use a case in point: Cooper Cronk, one of the best halfbacks the game has ever seen, was a union player. Crichton, the Roosters forward, union player. So they are losing top quality talent to another sport. Technically, rugby league is so different now to rugby union. It's unreal. But then they're buying back the talent later on at an overinflated price because they're getting desperate to plug the gaps that they're losing. And because they're doing that, more young kids are like, well, I haven't got a pathway to get to the top. They've got the Matt Giteau rule for international caps, so a lot of players are going over to Europe and a lot are going to North America to Major League Rugby to play, um, and earn their coin, which is totally fair. And therefore, they're not eligible to represent Australia. Um, in regards to Eddie Jones, can he have that impact? Look, the Wallabies are still a very decent side. The issue is the Sheffield Shield is low quality, low crowds, not enough money, and there is more interest in the AFL and NRL fan point of view than union. And the collapse of the old Super Rugby system and the restructuring of the current Super Rugby system, there's money issues. They've lost sponsors. Oh yeah, Shoot Shield, Sheffield Shield's cricket. Ooh, they both have very similar names. Shush, tired. Um, but yeah, the state of domestic below Super Rugby level is not great. There seemed to be that upper class element to it, the snobbery. Although rugby league, as I've been watching some of the under 18s schools championship that the NRL has now put in place, it's changing. But there seems to be that snobbery about it as well, much which is stereotypical. It's not always the case. Um, so the grassroots is a mess. But then when they put Ryling Castle in charge, they put a Kiwi for one who had a background in netball in charge of rugby union, and the results were expected. It didn't matter that she was a woman. It didn't matter that she had been a sports administrator. They put a foreigner in charge of running their domestic game, and that wasn't the right move. She wasn't the right person to for the needs of the time. It cost them sponsors. It cost them a massive lawsuit with Israel Folau. We'll go from there. I wouldn't say it's too boring. I think the situation with rugby union is professionalism hasn't truly worked. There's a massive financial imbalance. Only a handful of leagues and clubs worldwide are actually truly profitable. Um, and in Australia, they're losing players to AFL and NRL. In New Zealand, they're losing players to playing overseas for more money. Um, England clubs are going bust. Wales clubs are going bust. And so there's only a handful of nations where there's stability. The French league is where the money's at. Major League Rugby is where the growth is at. So we'll see what happens. I wouldn't say it's completely dead. I just say the way they've gone around building the national side by recruiting NRL players who are off contract or luring them a bit. They're after Suoliti. Like the kid's only had a short spell in league. He's had a very good spell in league. He's also played a bit of union as well. I don't think the Roosters want to lose him. So we'll see what happens there. Um, should Australian rugby hire Kiwi or um, South African coaches as development coaches? I don't think that fixes the problem either. Um, in reality, I don't think if they're hiring them, that's just a sticking plaster over a festering wound. Um, that doesn't solve the problem long term. They need to find out why at grassroots level it's not appealing, why the sport continues to lose money. That's a global issue, and we'll go from there. With the salary cap that might be in place soon in Premiership rugby, do you see England international cap system changing to allow players? It has to. It has to. Because there are several young English players playing in Major League Rugby. And we know the high profile English players that have gone to French rugby that are now no longer eligible for selection for the inside, which is a massive loss. Um, I wouldn't say it's declining as Africa. They're at a crossroads. Um, but also African sport right now is at a crossroads. Cricket, football, rugby. It's to do with money. It's to do with outward investment or investment inwards to South Africa. The cricket side of things is the ICC, and we've discussed that to death in regards to how the big three of India, England, and Australia basically have a cartel, um, which is held together by Indian blackmail and corruption when it comes to distribution of funds to the other test boards. So that's a money issue. Um, the situation though about Razi Erasmus, some of his antics over the last 3, 4 years haven't been in great. They haven't helped the image of the sport, but South Africa still produces some scary talent, and with their education system, a public school, grammar school, um, it is still big. I wouldn't say it's declining. Um, I think the quality of the Springboks right now, they're not as good as what they were, but the sport itself, they're still mad for it. I think they're still mad for it because they're still a world class team. And with that, with the nation's social history, recent social history, it's very important with the Mandela, Francois Pienaar, 95 World Cup, and the photographs and that unity it brings. Um, it has a cultural importance in South Africa. I think what was more damaging, the two bigger damaging things for South African sport, Oscar Pistorius and Hansi Cronje. They did more to damage the image of South African sport post apartheid than any other sports scandal or incident or suspension or a foul play or anything like that. That they were the two biggest moments I think that have had a negative impact on South African sport was Hansi Cronje's match fixing allegations, which were then proven to be true in the end, and Oscar Pistorius and his murder conviction. Oscar Pistorius is the modern day OJ Simpson. They had a much bigger, wide ranging impact on South African sport than you know the situation with the current state of the Springboks or the South Africans being battered by the Australians in cricket. Honestly. Oh right, the FA Cup prank. Um, Someone has obviously done a bit of a prank. I think someone's getting sacked from the BBC very, very soon. Um, Someone basically put a tape recorder with some pornographic material on it behind one of the chairs in the studio and had a timer on it, and it played at a certain time during the broadcast. And whether that's well, we'll see what comes of any investigation, because Ofcom obviously will have something to say. Um, and there'll be an internal investigation. But the BBC is one of those broadcasters under a lot of pressure for how their recent sports coverage of the Olympics and various like football tournaments, rugby, and things like that has gone. Its coverage of the Rugby League World Cup. Well, I enjoyed watching the Rugby League World Cup a couple of months ago. I felt their coverage was really, really had gone backwards since 2013. Um, and there's a reason why rugby league has got a problem in Europe with growth and sustained growth and growing the game in non-traditional locations. Um, the BBC coverage was atrocious. The organisers didn't help themselves much either, but the quality of the broadcasting wasn't the best. That was one of the FA Cup game replays I didn't watch. I will admit I didn't watch the Wolves Liverpool replay at Molineux. I know the floodlights failed as well, so it was a night of antics. Best way. My thoughts on it: I think there'll be an internal investigation with the BBC, um, and this adds further pressure to the broadcaster. Oh, I'm doing rugby league for nothing. Um, um, the, the fact that I'm a fan in spite of the poor coverage in the UK, not because of the coverage in the UK. Um, I've enjoyed rugby league before the Super League was a thing, and before the Super League was nearly destroyed the sport in Australia. Um, I've been a fan since I've been watching it um, since I could walk and talk. My dad was a massive sports fan. He enjoyed both codes. He played both codes in the army, I believe. Um, but I'm a fan in spite of the poor media coverage in the UK, the poor media. But yes, their BBC Sport division is based in Salford, so you would think their coverage would be a hell of a lot better, considering the majority of Super League teams are based, well, the majority of rugby league teams are based in the north of England, apart from like five, two London teams, Catalan, Toulouse, and Cornwall, and then there's a couple in the Midlands. About seven teams in total are outside the north of England that play in the league structure that we have in Europe. You would think their coverage would be a lot better. It's not. In BBC in England, do you have to pay for a fee for? You have to pay a thing called a TV license. So I don't have my TV plugged in. My TV is over there. My TV aerial is down there. Doesn't work. Um, and so if you're even watching on the internet, you've got to pay a license fee. Now, I think obviously I believe that obviously, in my opinion, it's an outdated concept. I think the BBC will eventually go to full commercial. It's the only way it's going to survive. Same with Channel 4. Although there's resistance that go, oh no, can't have that because that's a thing. But less people are willing to pay it. That means the fee has to go up, which is unsustainable. And people will vote with their wallets. And yes, if the BBC could have done things better with, because money isn't everything. You see, money isn't everything, right? You can have less resources and actually have better results. It's how you spend, and in case of spending, getting the right talent and the right pieces in play. You can do things on a budget on a very small amount of money and make a massive profit. The problem is, or do really well. Um, the the situation we have is too many middle managers on a lot of money, and we're talking big salaries in the BBC or a commercial broadcaster or subscription broadcaster, for example, are on big salaries for not doing a lot of work. And when it comes to sports broadcasting, where it's a live event, you've got a lot of moving pieces. You don't have a studio for just everything. You have the little studio with the presenters is and a couple of pundits, but in reality, you've got a lot of moving parts on the field or on the rink or on the court. There's a lot of bits in play. Um, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of action happening. Anything can happen. It's a live broadcast. A lot of things can happen. And TV equipment is not cheap. But if I got a slightly better version of my phone, I could easily get pretty decent quality footage on my phone, which is again the social media side of things. What I'm doing is a threat to mainstream media because I could go out and I could be in a stadium and I could film the whole thing, put it on an SD card, and you know, or film a sports event or a YouTube short or whatever it is. Gain a lot of traction on the internet, YouTube views and all that, social media, make a lot of ad revenue, and actually earn more money than a journalist. Because the middle management is where the problem lies. There were too many people on big salaries trying to justify their position. Um, then you, then we come full circle, and now they've got to diversify their commentators, their presenters, and you're thinking this person's not good enough to be in this position. They're just not up to the standard required to do what they're doing. They're there for X, Y, Z under whatever criteria that has been put, and it is what it is. Yeah, the BBC only shows international and Challenge Cup, and not even all the Challenge Cup games. Foxtel, I'm not in Australia. I can't comment on um, the prices of satellite subscription TV overseas. What I do know is the prices here are exactly the same. They're going up, and people are switching off. Which is why I'm glad I've got my rugby league subscription through the NRL website. It's far more affordable, and I get far more value for money for the product I get than if I had my TV plugged in and had a full subscription. I'm getting more value for money with my internet subscription. Now, as I say, yes, I'm getting value for money out of what I've got, and it works out at a really good value for money as well. And we'll see what happens there. Hey man, just got through your mental health prediction video. You really like to hear your insight thoughts. Want to say thanks for being here and putting your heart into video. Well, I've had a tough couple of weeks of work. I'm not going to lie. I've had a bit of a tough spell at work, and I've got a good friend who's seriously ill right now, and it has been obviously it weighs you down a little bit when you have these things going on. Oh, I've got a little ball patch. Oh, it's nice. I've got a little ball patch. I think. Yeah, I've had a lot going on. I've got a friend who's not very well. Work isn't going great. The weather's crap, which weighs you down. A lot of things going on, but when I go back in time to when I started the channel up, I was in the same. I was grumpy and angry at the world, and that was 6 years ago in April that I started doing content. I have got a little ball patch there. I think that's where I caught my hair when I was doing my ponytail one day. I put my hair in a ponytail and when it was long, and I was combing my hair and a bit got caught, and I ripped it. And it got caught. Yeah, got a little ball patch. It'll grow back. It'll grow back. Don't have a ball patch. It's just there. Um, but no, I when we discuss a player like Maradona, Paul Gascoigne, and the addiction issues that they had throughout their careers. Paul Merson, he regularly gets slated online for being brutally honest. Tony Adams. Um, uh, no, the hair's pretty thick all round, to be fair. I don't really have a thinner side, I just have a little patch just Yeah, and I think that's where I caught my hair when I was putting it in a ponytail or combing it, and a few little bits got caught, and I ripped them out. um, but no, in regards to what I did, the video I did last night, I just was having a really rough couple of days, um, and I've been thinking about doing a video like that for a little while. And yeah, I just felt a bit miserable. And I thought, you know what? This is something that needs to be discussed. It's something that I don't think um, enough people are brave enough to discuss. Notice the view count isn't great on it because whenever I've done videos on a player having addiction problems, I've done it in the past. When we have players suspended for recreational drug use, or getting done for drink driving, or whatever the issue may be, they don't do very well. People don't care. They want to see the athlete perform. They want to see the team perform. They want to see the goals scored, the big hits. Um, you know, sometimes the fights. The rough and tumble, the rivalries, and then you find out when a player retires, or even after they passed away. You hear the stories. So we know about George Best, we know about Maradona, we know about Gazza, we know about Bob Probert in the NHL, and Mike Rivero with his alcohol problems. We know about Grant Fuhr getting banned for the cocaine use. We know about all these things. But then more stories come out about some of their teammates going, well, he was a raging pisshead as well, or he was now Brian Clough, one of the most famous managers this country's ever produced, alcoholic. And we find out like Tommy Raudonikis, the former Australian rugby league legend who died a year or so ago, famous for his drinking antics, would be classed as an alcoholic. Never admitted to being alcoholic, but the Australian drinking culture is, I swear, the whole nation is drunk. They're the drunkest nation on earth. But you get the principle behind it. There is a drink and, to a certain extent, drug culture in sport. But I was thinking of it from a different point of view because when I started the channel, I was very depressed, battling drug addiction, battling mental health issues. I was recovering from a motorcycle accident. I didn't have a lot going right. Direction my path was taking wasn't great. Um, and the first, I think, 5 or 6 videos I did, it was just me, like a video vlog diary thing where I was just angry at the world. And then Neymar happened to sign for PSG for a silly amount of money, and then Newcastle United were investigated for dodgy tax investigation. And then Mark Sampson was sacked as England's women manager. And then suddenly doing sports videos was a bit of a thing. And then the Rugby League World Cup in 2017 took place, and the rest is history. Made a little bit of money off the platform. Then they changed their rules. They changed their rules twice since I've been making content in regards to making revenue. And they've added further tweaks to the revenue earning again, which is frustrating. So it means more hurdles that I've got to jump through, more hoops that I've got to jump through, and it's an ongoing battle almost every day, and that gets me down. Knowing that I've hit this target. Oh no, you've got to hit this other target. How they keep moving the goalposts, and that is frustrating. Really, that ball patch is really going to annoy me now. But I think there's a few other little ball patches I have. But that's what I find really really frustrating as well. My insight though, you it, there are too many flaws in this. Even when the system had money, and when times were a lot better than what they are now, um, so many, and I was one of them, fell through the cracks in the sense of we were let down by the system that was meant to assist and help. And then society goes, "Oh, this guy's an addict, pisshead, druggie." In reality, things had led to being an addict, which should have been prevented. That makes sense. And then when we look at sports stars, when they're, you know, Harry Maguire getting, all the abuse he's had on social media in the last 2 years, and the threats against himself and his family. We look at Marcus Rashford and Saka after the Euros. It's just there you go. All optimists should be shot for cowardice, as someone said someone once. It's only the bravest that admit depression. Most are strong. Um, well, personally, I would like to line up a few people against the one having probably shot maybe the Conservative Party and half my work colleagues, but I mean management. Sorry. Um, tongue in cheek, not jokes aside. It is tough, and there seems to be this culture of not confronting massive social issues, and sport can do a lot to help confront this. And we have like mental health awareness round in NRL or the NHL. You know, we have the hockey fights cancer. We have Indigenous rounds, various things in the AFL and NRL. Um, shouldn't every round of matches in the NRL and AFL and NHL be for everyone? Like we have women in league rounds, so the Manly Seagulls will have the Pride jersey fiasco. Um, we have World Mental Health Awareness Month and World Mental Health Awareness Day. It should be every day. We have like Valentine's Day. You should love your partner every day. Shouldn't it? It's just a commercial thing. Um, so yeah, I find the Christmas period quite tough. I find this time of year quite tough anyway because my dad died at this time of year. My granddad died this time of year. So I find this particular time of year quite tough anyway for a couple of family bereavements. But then the summer months are like just lose mates left, right, and centre. Between June and September, they seem to drop like flies. It's ridiculous. Um, but there are certain times of year that I find quite tough, and the festive period from October through to Easter. So basically, when Diwali starts and Halloween and all that, all the way through to our Easter. So all the religious festival periods, which is about half the year, I find very very tough. Um, yes, there's a lot of sport on, which is fantastic, but I do find it tough. Um, and living by myself, yes, I get on with a lot of my neighbours. I get on with, um, I have a few friends that I talk to and see regularly. But yeah, it's tough, and it it's one of them where I think sport as a social construct can have a massive impact because of its outreach. Massive impact. It's a problem in British society having a social conscience. Better to be a selfish prick to survive, sadly. We are turning into America more and more. Um, we are turning into the bad side of America, the selfishness, the greed. Um, that I am noticing more and more people are less caring um, than what we were a decade, 15 years ago. Um, that has been a societal shift, and it doesn't help. And this is where I think sport can have a negative impact. It doesn't help when individual athletes are seen to be egotistical, selfish, and out of touch with reality. And then there's all these various scandals of player misbehaviour and criminality, and we've seen a lot of cases of that. And they're on big money. And I've always said it's a privilege and a right to be a professional athlete earning big money. It's a privilege, and a lot of them have been spoon fed this privilege as if it's a God given right to them since the age of 11. Because a lot of them have been in the academy system at football clubs or rugby clubs or cricket clubs since the age of 11. They've been scouted. So, yes, they're still going to school, but they're also getting that extra support. And they're being told all through their formative years, you're going to be a superstar, you're going to be this. And so will spend the best part of 20, 30 years of their lives living um, in a bubble, and they don't live in a true reality because they'll sign their first contract at the age of 16, but they're actually getting paid, or 15. and they're earning an income at that age that's far higher than their peers, so the people around them who they may go to school with. By the age of 18, 19, they're earning more in a week than some of their friends will earn in a month. By the age of 21, they're earning more in a month than some of their friends will earn in a year. By age 25, they're earning a week what it will take a lifetime for people of who grew up around them, for example, in that same neighbourhood, will ever learn. And that is part of the problem with professional sport is they are given this sense of entitlement before they're actually senior pros, and I think that is a problem. Now, money doesn't buy happiness. Does it helps with certain aspects? Does buy happiness. And you look at the amount of high-profile athletes as a percentage of, let's say, all professional football players, rugby players, all professional athletes across the world. They're a significantly small percentage of the overall population. When you factor in general population and then professional athletes, the percentages of them that have suffered from some form of depression higher, I believe, than the general population. Gonna have to bounce. Nice hopping in. Have a good weekend. Yeah, I've got a 5 day week. Well, I've got a 2 day work week and a 5 day weekend next week, so I'll have more time to do more content next week. The weather looks like it's going to be slightly warmer than this week, which is nice. So the weather's going to be nicer next week, so it's not going to rain as much. Snow threat, so the weather will be a bit more pleasant, a bit more stable. How long that lasts for is another thing, but it looks like it's going to be a decent week weather-wise next week, which is nice. Um, so we'll just have to see what happens. But yeah, thank you for popping in. Thank you for the questions. Really appreciate it. I know you weren't in for very long, but yesterday's video topic I think is one that I think we need to discuss more, and not just as individuals, but as a sports community because we're all sports fans here. That's why we're here on this channel. If I did it on the other channel, it'll get like what 5, 10 views, and no one would care. Really, I've only got 70 subscribers on the other channel, so there you go. But this channel, we've got a bigger community, and we're all of like mind. Um, and I honestly think, yeah, most people who actually are subscribed to this channel are probably of like of mind. If I'm being honest, the older you get, the more you realise the majority of people actually are actually depressed. So just can't base up to it. They bury it. I wouldn't say everyone's depressed. I would say life is what you make of it, obviously. And as I said in the video last night, I have made mistakes, and I can't go back. If I could have a time machine and go back to in time, I would. Life is what you make of it. There are challenges. Life is not easy. If life was easy, it'd be no fun. Good saying that. But there is definitely issues that I think sport as a societal construct can have a massive positive impact. Unfortunately, I think sport is having also a negative impact when you see the role models, the high profile athletes, sports stars, who aren't really living in reality. I think it gives a false impression of what it is to be an athlete. It's a privilege, not a right. They believe it's a right. It's a privilege to right, but that's the difference. Be it for people, be it playing at recreational, grassroots, recreational amateur level, community level, to watching and supporting it is an escape. Um, it's like a way of life. It's a religion. Some people may have, like me, really low paid jobs, not a lot going. But sport for us is our escape. Now, yeah, sport is our escape. and it's our release. And what frustrates me is how some of our sports teams and professional sports structures are being undermined um, through various means. And we've seen in recent years the pushback from fans saying enough's enough. This is our thing. This is our medicine. This is my therapy. Right, it is. And my ice hockey team that I follow locally, obviously they've moved arenas, and the team still exists. I just haven't been able to watch them for 3, 4 years because of COVID and moving and all that, and living not near to where they play at the moment. Well, they're still up the road, but it's without a vehicle now, it's impossible to get there easily. Although a friend of mine who was in the chat earlier, a plague doctor, my friend Rob, I may organise with him next weekend to go watch a game. Um, and when I was having some tough times in the early days of the channel, I mean, there's some YouTube shorts of me in the old arena watching the warm up and all that, the post match handshake. That was my 1 or 2 games a week release. That was my medicine. That was people laugh, but I got on with it. I actually knew a few members of the team, and I actually got to speak to some of them. I said, "Yeah, this is my medicine. This gets me through my crap week. I'm not having a good time, and this is good for me. I'm still here because of." And they went, "Oh," I said, "Yeah." Coming to watch, ice hockey was my medicine. It was um, my therapy, and then the channel kicked off, and they both became my therapy. And I've now lost one of my ice hockey support dog, as I'll call it, my ice hockey. Um, but I've still got the channel, uh, and so that was a positive. And yeah, I might go to a game next weekend with my mate. I'll get paid on Friday, so next week, so and we might do that, and then go from there. In regards to the passion that fans have, that yeah, sport is their release. It brings communities together. It helps people just forget about their problems for a few hours. And when we're seeing sports teams go bust, when we're seeing sports teams in administration, when we're seeing dodgy owners misappropriating funds and badly running teams, it has a negative impact on the community. You look at Scunthorpe, you look at Oldham, those are very deprived, poor areas with not a lot of opportunity, high crime, poverty rates that are higher than the national average. For them, their club is their community, it's their release, it's their happy place. And we're seeing that up and down, well, around the world, quite frankly, but up and down the country. And yeah, I also think social media's had in the early days positive impact in the first couple of years, but in the last decade or so, it's become more and more toxic as time has gone on. And now we know how the social media companies operate with our data and deliberately making certain features on them addictive. Um, more of a negative. I think YouTube, I think, is one of the few social media platforms that I think still has more positives than negatives. Although, as a creator, it is frustrating. There have been issues on the platform for a variety of reasons. However, I think YouTube as a whole is more positive than negative, whereas Twitter and Facebook, it's the opposite, and Instagram, it's the opposite, which is why most of my social media content is YouTube. I do share things. I haven't shared anything on Instagram for a while, but I do share my content on my Facebook and Twitter. I put the occasional thing on Instagram, but rarely. If I'm being honest, um, but it is what it is, and occasionally I send things on WhatsApp. That's not really social media. That's more of a communications platform. But I do occasionally send links via WhatsApp to friends to do with my channel. Um, but yeah, it it's definitely you know a a different set of circumstances. Um, and hopefully we get the super chat enabled as well, which will then generate some income, which will be much, much needed. And we'll make the progress we have to make. We just got to get the view hours up. I might do some more content this evening. I've got to go shopping now. Yeah, I've got to go shopping. I don't want to go shopping, but I've got to go shopping. But yeah, there's definitely things that I think I could do better on the platform. And yeah, go from there. But I felt the need to make the video last night because I'd had it in my mind for a little while. Um, I've been making content now for 6 years. In April, 6 years I've been making content. It's mad, and there have been some ups and downs along the way, and but 6 years making content is ridiculous. But I do think the majority of people who follow are of a similar mindset. I do believe that the majority of subscribers, I would think, have a similar mindset. There's one or two that I think have uh, contrary views to the majority, but I don't mind. I don't mind having the discussion. For Champstead FC, do you see them? I think it's Bracknell Town. I think are playing. Who are they better be playing? Aylesbury or something. Um, but yeah, to be an ultra, you'd have to be ultra violent. I've seen the Roma and Lazio ultras go at it in the centre of Rome one night. It wasn't particularly a pleasant experience, running from bar to bar. But then I realised actually I can get hold of some booze here, so I managed to swap a couple of bottles of grappa and a few bottles of wine, and go back to my hotel room. And I was only a student, um, but no. As I say, I think we are in agreement though. I think the majority of people who support the channel are of a like mind and similar views to the world. Um, Bring them on. No, but as we said, as I started the stream, I'm going to continue with just briefly before I go. The Juventus situation raises a lot of concerns, as we've all discussed, in regards to um, club finances and the transparency of the system. That's my neighbour's washing machine they've just put on, so we will not be on stream much longer if they're doing their housework because the floor, my ceiling and their floor are really thin, so that's going to become annoying. But no, in regards to the Juventus situation, that's club transfer policy, transparency, finances, and accountability, and how many clubs are actually fiddling their finances. Because I believe, in reality, it's got to be about 70% of all clubs in Europe are probably on the fiddle. So I believe there's more to that to come out. We know about um, the bans that have been handed out, the fines, and Pavel Nedved getting involved in that is just stunned me. Pavel Nedved getting involved in that has really, really stunned me. Um, and he's a fantastic player, but that's actually quite shocking how involved he was. Yep, that's their washing machine. So that happens like twice a day. So there's that. Um, the situation with the NRL CBA, I will really look into that in depth. That situation and whether the players decide to go on strike because the All Star game is days away, only a few weeks away, and the pre-season trial matches start in just over a week's time. So that is sticky bum time, as I call it, with the NRL and the NRL Rugby League Players Association, and their discussions over the next CBA and revenue sharing, and with what's happened with the salary cap, with further expansion on the cards with an 18th team, most likely going to be the North Sydney Bears. That brings in a whole host of issues, which rugby league in Australia hasn't seen since 1996, 97. So that raises a lot of questions about the transparency of negotiations and revenue sharing and fairness. You want to love Italian football. Italian football in the 80s and 90s was fantastic. Yes, the corruption aspect that's now reared its ugly head a couple of times in my lifetime. For you, you would remember the Paolo Rossi bribery scandal because you're that bit older. That goes back to the late 70s, early 80s, just before the 82 World Cup. Yes, unfortunately, in more recent times, that has become an issue. Um, the prosecutors are really after them. Juventus and the other clubs, because Empoli and Sampdoria, I think there were 16 or 17 clubs involved, 58 individuals. More is going to come out about this scandal. It's not making massive headlines. That's the weird thing. It's only on the BBC Sport page, for example. It wasn't the main story. It was like the sixth or seventh story down. It did make the front news page for a little bit, um, but again, you know, in regards to loving Italian football, it was so popular in the 90s, 2000s, and then the Calciopoli scandal hit, and it hasn't been the same since. Um, so it is having a negative impact on the quality of the national side, the quality of the league, the, and fans' perception. And the Gazzetta dello Sport did a massive article about 15 years ago, I seem to remember. And in this article, I read the English online version because you can. There are ways of doing it. They had fantastic Gazzetta dello Sport. If you can get the English version of that, it's fantastic. It comes out a few days later, but it is absolutely fantastic. The Pink newspaper. They did a article saying why can't football be like rugby? In the regards of no corruption in rugby and the fans are well behaved. And the image that then presents to investors, so potential sponsors, the wider, the wider world when you're selling the product. They go, why can't football, not just in Italy, this was a generalisation, why can't football be like rugby? And that was that and they discussed the hooligan element, they discussed the corruption, they discussed unequal TV right revenue distribution, the whole structure of why can't it be like rugby? Slightly less money, better behaved fans, better behaved players, like with scandals off the field and on the field, um, and less corruption within the sport. Now, rugby union's got its problems, and rugby league's got its problems, but they're not the same as football. It's YouTubers like you that can cover Juventus stuff better than mainstream media. It's like they don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Well, Juventus had days before Agnelli was formally, given his 2-year suspension from football activities. He was still going about this European Super League. The only three clubs that are still interested in it are the three clubs in most debt and the most corrupt, which is Juventus, Real Madrid, and Barcelona. So let that sink in. What else? There was something else I wanted to. Yeah. Rick Tocchet is now back in charge of an NHL team with the Vancouver Canucks. And Bruce Boudreau is out the door. And trade deadline is approaching, but the All-Star weekend is coming up soon as well. But for me, I've got to get ready to go to the shops before it gets cold again because it's just warmed up enough where it's not complete sheet of ice. Thank you very much for all the questions. I will dig into the NRL salary cap issues and the CBA negotiations. I will look at the Juventus points deduction. And from me, thank you very much for watching, and I will have some more content for you soon. So, goodbye for now.